Hello everybody, I'm the Imagine Idiot, and welcome back to Aquarama. And welcome back to a shot that you've probably seen before, because, idiot that I am, I realised last episode I showed you the station, and the theming, and everything else for the Bildret, but I didn't explain the story behind it. This is actually a bit of a tribute to the last roller coaster that I was actually on. This is heavily built on and heavily profiled from the Wooden Wild Mouse at Luna Park here in Sydney, which I think, if I'm not wrong, it's not currently operational, but I think it's one of, if not the last Wooden Wild Mice that's actually operating. So I wanted to be sort of doing something, a bit of a tribute to the local area, a bit of a tribute to my roller coaster riding, and this is in large amount profiled after that. It's not perfect because, as I say, I'm the Imagine Idiot, not the Imagineer, but I've gotten it fairly close and managed to keep it still as an exciting ride that the audience will want to go on. It's mostly good. It kind of loses its luster a little bit around this part, but for the most part, I'm quite happy with that as a little bit of a tribute to Sydney's incredibly small roller coaster scene. But that's not what we're focusing on this week. This week, if we shoot on all the way over our boardwalk area, we're going to be focusing on this area down here, adjacent to the lake, with our new transport options and our stunning new bridge. This is one of the first things I've built for this. I spent a lot of time and effort on this bridge because I want it to look really good. Oh my word, it was fiddly. It involves a lot of pieces. Not just the archways, not just the span and the trim and everything else, but each of these little squares is its own piece of trim turned around and embedded into the wall. While I'm showing you this in the span of obviously just a couple of minutes, building this bridge probably took up about a third of the build time for this episode. So I'm probably going to revisit that again in the second part once we come back. But also, we're going to be building out this area down here, adjacent to the lake and this new transport ride, which will take passengers from this side and the theme park side of the park across to the other side in what will eventually be the water park. And putting in a couple of rides, again, going for a bit of a boardwalk theme. Not sure if everything's going to stay in this position or this operation, but simple amusement park rides that you might get adjacent to a boardwalk. And we're also going to be going across to this little island here and filling out this little plaza area and picnic area that I think can get people in with maybe a couple of upsells as they walk across to the other side of the park. So, here's where we are at the moment. Everything's looking a little bit unfinished. Let's come back in just a minute once we've got everything set and looking good. And here we are back with a much more fleshed out area, or more accurately a much more fleshed out couple of areas. Just going to lean down and have another look at this bridge, in part because I'm horrifyingly proud of it and I spent a ridiculous amount of time building it, but also just to have a look at the pieces that are involved. So the base here is obviously brickwork, and the trim running along is also a little bit of just the standard brick there. Viking walls, the stone Viking walls for the majority of the bridge and the archways, with stone Viking fencing as the trim. Stone Viking trim as the trim. Stone Viking pillars, some various other stone pillars and caps, which I think are still from the Viking set. Iron girders from the standard supports and constructions. I think that these ties are also from supports, but I'm not certain. And just very standard fencing. And these caps, as I said, are a couple of elements from the Mythic set sunk in. We've got standard wall trim for the black areas there, and the blue areas are the end cap from one of the trims, turned around and sunk into the wall and just replicated down along the length of the bridge until I start losing my will to live. But I think it ends up looking really good. Ultimately, this is going to be copied over to the other bridge on the other side of the island, but that's going to require fiddling around with and reorganizing it and setting it up, and I am just not doing that until we get over to the other side of the park. Swinging around, we get a very simple merry-go-round in a very basic park kind of setting. A lot of the gardening for this and a lot of the gardening through the park are these bushes with the red flowers and the ground coverage. and in my head the park has literally just come along, thrown some seeds down into the rough area, and walked away, and that's almost as much gardening as they're doing, a kind of wilding gardening that they don't have to spend much effort on. Very nice, very standard merry-go-round. A little bit more effort they've spent on the fences here to make it look a little bit more parky, because a wooden fence is cheap, even though they do almost exclusively use the standard cattle pen iron fencing everywhere else. Just put a little bit more effort in there to make that look a little bit more like a park or garden. And again, a bit of a stone wall up in front, and a tiny amount of gardening just at the area that most people are going to see, so stick a little bit more effort in there. I would love, personally, to have more custom themes for music in the game, and also louder music. I've noticed that the rides, when they're playing music, we've got a custom music track on for the Ferris wheel. You can kind of, if you squish your face right up against the ride, you can hear the music. But otherwise, you move a tiny amount away in the park and the normal park background just kicks in again and the music fades out. I'm not sure if there's any settings that I can use to fix that somewhere in the game, but compared to Planet Coaster 1, the music for the rides in the game is very, very quiet. I'd prefer it to be a little bit louder. Let me know if I've got a setting set wrong somewhere, someone will say in the comments. Scanning along, bit of a little tiny picnic area where people can sit, eat the food from the couple of quick service restaurants we've got built in here, and watch any friends or family they may have riding the merry-go-round. Close enough, I think, to get a nice little photo up there. But otherwise, we've just got the clock tower with a couple of healthier options. I noticed we've got a lot of fast food restaurants, we've got a Chief Beef, but we don't have any healthier eating options now, and given that they have guest needs as a thing in the game now, we actually do have to care about that. This is why I leave a lot of the needs and staff needs and everything set on, even though I'm playing in sandbox mode. Because having those needs and having those baked into the game means I have to pay attention to that, and I have to pay attention to providing things for the guests, which makes me play a little bit more honestly, makes me consider what people are going to need, instead of just putting down things that I think will be interesting and fun and pretty. So it leans a little bit more into the realism, and it leans a little bit more into creating a park that I think is more fun to experience and look at. For the rest of this building, I decided to build a clock tower, something that you could have showing the time of day and look up at from throughout the park. There are no in-game clocks at the moment, which again, Frontier would really love to see those, but I did manage to put one together using various in-game shapes, even to the point of having the clock hands move through animatronics. But as you can't help but notice, it does look like we're in a fast-forward cutaway to show the passage of time with how quickly those hands are whipping their way around the clock. Again, please someone shout out in comments if you actually know everything that's in the game and know a bit of a way to get those hands to move slower and slightly more in sync with the actual in-game passage of time. Because this would be fast even in the original Planet Coaster 1, and for how slowly time passes in Planet Coaster 2, this is really just like some kind of incredible time tunnel. I would love to be able to have those either go at a slower rate to look like time is actually passing reasonably, or even better, I would love to have actual clocks that we can put in there. Not too difficult to build though, just a simple flat, big, enlarged flat sign. All of the numbers on there are built out of flat sign pieces. The filigree in the background is another couple of signs scaled up and just repeatedly duplicated and rotated by a small amount. And the hands are, I believe, a couple of arrow signs that I've enlarged or moved around. The building itself, the clock tower, as well as providing the quick service restaurants, the actual tower in there would probably have some storage for park equipment and various things to make sure they've got a convenient place in the middle of the park to keep equipment, carts, all the things that go into running the park a little bit more efficiently. No need for me to say that. I like everything to actually have a thought behind it and a purpose as to what it could be, even if I'm just throwing down a building to fill in some space. Along a similar line, covered vending machines. Simple thing. Again, just built with a couple of wooden fence shapes and trims and built out that way, but I like having this here because And I'm sorry for once again going on a tangent about vending machines. I don't know how many times I'm going to do that in this series, but it's non-zero at this point. But vending machines like this, with this kind of cover, if you're wandering around the US and taking road trips, you'll often see vending machines with this kind of coverage in rest stops and sometimes in bus stations, which I think made this a really fitting way to do that for this area here next to the Lakeside Transit, just tying into that, oh, this is a transitional area, this is a transit kind of place. Theme, again with heavily inverted commas around the word theme. Moving on down towards the transit hub itself, towards the little steamboat station. Put in the garden here to mask a little bit of the transition because we've got a hefty height transition as we have to move down to the shore. Putting queues in along an area that's sloped, especially along an area that slopes down to the shore, is tricky. Tricky to build, even more tricky to fence, but I think we've mostly gotten that looking okay and working okay. If I can stop being caught on every piece of scenery in the vicinity, that would be fantastic. Again, more rock work, a nice little rock work fountain, just to sort of add a bit of what's the word I'm desperately searching for? A bit of a more classy look and feel, a bit more finesse and style to the area. None of those are the word I was going for, but you get the idea. Simple signage using in-game lettering pieces, and the return of Dab the Crab. I love that that's the piece I'm most excited about here. I'm going to do this in a few areas through the park, like having Dab kind of continue as a thing, popping his head up in places you wouldn't necessarily expect him. Because, again, I love putting things on top of things for no good reason in Planet Coaster. For the station itself, you've got some simple wooden framework, Viking wood walls, the ever-present brick base, resort wood pillars, and I think Viking wooden pillars. Some nice themed, a little bit, this is from the Viking set lights, but again, just as I did with the Bilgerette, I'm using those for a more nautical theme. And I think this has ended up looking quite nice. The wooden jetty has fairly well covered up the station on both sides, doesn't clip into the boats, and really does carry on the nautical theme. If you catch the boats here in Sydney, they're not wooden jetties, but they are free-floating jetties that the ferries in Sydney Harbour come in by, and I wanted to have a bit of a look and a feel of that. And again, I've only done this side of the transit, only done this side of the station for the steamboats. It goes all the way around to the other side, but just as with the bridge, I think I'm quite literally going to cross that bridge when I come to it, and then build out the station there. Probably going to have the same theme for the station on the other side, but depending on how things go, depending on how things look, I might end up having this with a different theme if we really lean quite hard into theme for the water park. We'll remain to see on that one. We come across now into what I'm calling Picnic Island. Simple, I think as I said before in the earlier section, just a place to grab people as they pass across from one side of the park to the other. For game purposes, this is a way to make sure it's not just one massive, long path that leads across the lake. Gives the guests a bit of a reason to come over into the middle, and things to do, places to sit, places to drop garbage, so that it's not just one unbroken path that probably the guests won't want to go down. Giving it a bit of theming, we've put rocks all the way around to hide the shoreline there. I wanted to build out a bit of a pier here to give the boats as they go past something to look at. Again, heavy use of the jetty theme in this episode. Wooden jetty pillars, standard jetties, rope from I think again that's in the Viking set, as is the boat and the winch. Some resort signage and the resort buoy lampposts. Guests cannot access this. There's no need for putting things in along guest safety lines. It would be incredibly risky to have guests just running up along this pier. So that's all in a fenced-off area behind those food vans. With the food vans, I have said I love using the in-game brands. So we've got a Gulpy stand there on the tuk-tuk. Very, very minimal theming. Just use the actual tuk-tuk and the food van to create the stalls, put in the stands inside them. Almost nothing else needed doing. Just a bit of signage on top to dress them up and colouring the tuk-tuk and the van into relevant themes. As I said, I do like using the in-game theming, and I like using the in-game brands. And I will do that unless I have an excuse to be incredibly immature. So just for once, we're not using the Hot Dog Squad brand. Instead, we've got the Wienermobile, where guests can come along and, as it says down at the bottom there, just grab a wiener. I'm not even going to make excuses. And now it's time for everyone's favourite part of the episode, the jump cut that I put in, thanks to the traffic noise outside. I had to record this a few times. 3 times were because 3 different loud vehicles went past outside, and 1 time was because I just got weirdly dark about the pier. But, that aside, we've moved the Helter Skelter away from the mainland and out here onto the island. We did that because I just wasn't happy with how it was looking. It wasn't sitting well next to the station, and it was breaking up the sight line along the boardwalk. So instead, we've moved it out here onto the island. And we've leaned a little bit into what a lot of people, I think, have done with the Helter Skelter, which is to dress it up like a lighthouse. In my case, that's just putting a little animatronic light on the top, spinning around at the moment. I might come back later and have a look at this and dress this up properly as a lighthouse, put some stone cladding around it, things like that. But at the moment, I'm just going to lean into it just being a bit of a Helter Skelter on a boardwalk/jetty. And this jetty we've just dressed up the same as the one on the other side, with the resort buoys as lights, rope work around the thing, and a standard iron cattle pen on there to keep people away from the edges of the jetty. And then we're just going to swing around and come out here onto the nice little picnic area that we've got in. Just a place where people can sit, eat food from the food trucks here on the island, and people watch out across the lake, watching the steamboats coming and going, and watching the boardwalk with its Ferris wheel and various sort of rides spinning and looking appealing in the background. And it will also give us a good view out here across the lake onto what we're going to be working on next episode, which is going to be this more highly themed area here on the right-hand shore. But until then, this is where we're standing at the moment with the park. But remember, if anything doesn't look completely right, if anything isn't hitting that level of realism that I'm going for, if anything's looking a bit off, constantly working on improving, but of course, I'm not an Imagineer, I'm the Imagine Idiot. Hope that you enjoyed everything so far, and I'll see you back here next week.